How's it going, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Cold Front Report. And tonight we have to talk about the Bills' 6-year, $258 million extension that they gave to franchise quarterback Josh Allen. And there's plenty of training camp news to go over. And thank you all for joining us tonight. Let's get it. How's it going, everybody? Thank you for tuning in. It's a pleasure to go live and be able to talk with the gentleman on your screen. First and foremost, Travis Blakesley. Travis, I know you've been at training camp for these past couple of days. You've got to see it with your eyes. I'm excited to hear your insight. How you doing, man?
Doing great, man. It was a good experience, and I did catch a shirt from Billy the Buffalo.
Oh, hey. That's a must. Free shirts, free merch. It's never bad merch.
Well, I had to give it to the little kid in front of me, so.
Oh, okay.
My man.
Nice guy.
You got it.
DJ, it's always a pleasure to go live with you, man. I'm excited to talk with you. How's it going?
Great, man. After a fun week in Bills Mafia, I'm back again on another show. Another opportunity to speak to Bills Mafia.
It's always a pleasure to be able to talk to Bills Mafia, and it's even more of a pleasure to talk about extending Josh Allen. I don't know about you guys, and I don't know about Bills Mafia, but me personally, I did not anticipate this deal getting done before this season. I thought it was going to be something that they were going to save for next offseason, or maybe Josh Allen's agents were going to save for next offseason after this year could potentially go very well for him and the Bills. But, you know, they got the deal done, $258 million, the second highest paid quarterback in the league per year. EJ, I'm starting with you. What are your initial thoughts about the Bills extending Josh Allen?
I had said before that I thought they should have signed him after the Chiefs game just so the price didn't go way up. I knew he was going to get paid at some point. Didn't expect it to be this early just due to the fact that Brandon Beane came and gave it a week. If it wasn't done in that week, they'd be done with it. But I'm happy for Josh that he got his money. He made some leaps and bounds improvements in terms of his accuracy. He went from having the highest rate of uncatchable passes his first 2 years in the league to having the lowest rate of uncatchable passes this year, and that's quite a massive improvement. Made a huge improvement from clean pocket accuracy, and those are the traits and those are the statistics that are very transferable from year to year. And the fact that he made these jumps, the Bills had to hop on this. They've locked their guy up for the next 6 years. He's got the most guaranteed money of any quarterback in NFL history, and he even said himself, like, this guy, they're paying him for what he's going to do, not what he's already done. And I think that Josh has a very bright future, and the Bills have a very bright future with their quarterback leading the helm.
Absolutely. Travis, how do you feel?
Oh, I mean, EJ summed it up great right there. I don't think I really expected it to happen so soon, but I think it happened in the way I expected, meaning in the middle of the night, you wake up, there's nothing, no rumblings, and, boom, it just happens. It's kind of cool to see how tight-lipped the organization is. One guy leaks it, and then it comes right out. So, yeah, I mean, there's nothing much else to say. He came in as a project, and he progressed every step of the way. He did what most people thought he couldn't. And, that kind of is the MO, especially with that quote that just came out about Brian Dable about remembering who you are and where you're from. I mean, he epitomizes that. This is a guy that you're going to see Allen jerseys on little kids all across the country because he kind of epitomizes that. It could be anybody. It doesn't matter who you are, what your pedigree is, where you're from, how long you played. If you put your mind to something, you can accomplish it. So it's kind of cool having that type, not only somebody who translates on the field, but off the field as well.
And how about just exactly what the extension means in general to the franchise? How about, the fact that this is the first time the Bills have extended? I asked the question almost as soon as the report came out in the CFR chat. I was wondering when the last time the Bills had extended any quarterback they had drafted, let alone one in the first round. This is a monumental moment for the Bills. It's a necessary moment for the Bills. You look at how Josh Allen's progressed from year over year, and then you watch the culmination of that, and it turns into a $258 million extension and the largest contract the Bills have ever handed out to a player ever. And the first extension they've given to a quarterback they had drafted in the first round since Jim Kelly. That is remarkable. And it's remarkable what Josh Allen has done. And I remember, the conversations that we would have throughout the course of last season as to who should receive credit, who deserves, the token of success as to why, or the reasoning as to why Josh Allen had, the splurge that he had last season, coming from a player, as EJ alluded to, somebody who struggled in 2019 from time to time, to a player who was, I wouldn't say borderline dominant, but second in the MVP voting last year. It's a player who had one of the best seasons of a Bills quarterback almost of all time. And it was remarkable. We talked about who deserves credit, where it should go to. I think the man who deserves all the credit and deserves, well, not a very large sum of that credit, is Josh Allen. And that's why he got paid, and that's why the Bills had the faith in him to commit to him for over the next 8 seasons. He's locked up through the 2028 season. That's huge for this team. It's huge for the comfort of the players. It's huge for the comfort of the quarterback. That's just something that the Bills don't have to worry about this season. The quarterback's going to be there for the foreseeable future, and that is point blank period what is going to happen. And a lot of people couldn't remember the time when the Bills could find a quarterback, where they could get a quarterback, that of Josh Allen. And, it's refreshing that they finally have the quarterback. They finally have the guy that they want there in place, and now he's going to be there for a very long time. And there's not a shadow of doubt as to where his commitment lies and, what the future – I wouldn't say what the future holds for him, but the fact remains that he's going to be a Buffalo Bill. And, it's huge. It's huge for this franchise. And I thought it was cool how – the first player who I really saw that came out and said anything was LaShawn McCoy. And I felt like LaShawn McCoy, Josh Allen's rookie year, had a lot to do with, the maturation process and just Josh Allen being able to feel comfortable in his own skin in this league. There was plenty of things to be said and heard about Josh Allen and all the doubt in the world. And I'm not saying that, those got in his head. But LaShawn McCoy certainly helped him ease into the NFL, and I thought that was pretty cool how he tipped his cap to him and just nodded that he deserved that he should take him out to dinner. As far as the finances are concerned, as far as how much the contract's for, what it means for the Bills, let's talk about how good of a job Brandon Beane did with this extension. He extended his current contract, and that's why he's under contract for the next 8 years. He still has to play through this year. He still has to play through the 5th-year option before this contract really kicks in. Travis, what do you think about how this contract really affects the Bills financially? As it's widely talked about, after these quarterbacks get paid, these teams can't really have the same amount of success they had prior when they were on cheaper deals. Do you think the Bills are going to struggle with that, or do you think that Brandon Beane did a pretty good job of kind of allowing the Bills to prepare for that and be able to adapt to that?
Well, I guess the first thing I have to say is that I think Brandon Beane's biggest attribute is how he moves money around. Financially, I think that's his elite talent, so to speak. So while we don't really know how this money is going to be used throughout his contract, as far as bonuses, signing bonuses, and just option bonuses, they'll have the flexibility to pay him when the cap allows for it. So certain bonuses are going to hit dead cap money right away. So when those TV deals hit, I believe you're going to see a balloon number. And then when we resign players such as, if we end up doing it, Stephon Diggs, I'm sure they'll be able to work some magic and make those the leaner years. I also think it's great that he's essentially playing on his last year of his rookie deal and then that 5th-year option. So while the cap continues to grow, we kind of have a little room to work with. So just like pretty much every deal we've seen from Beane, I'm totally comfortable with it. And like I said, you can question Beane's drafting, but what I think you can't ever question is his finances. And this man is looking so far down the road. I'm not worried. And I don't feel like I have to be a financial wizard to break down all these numbers and, kind of sweat it.
Yeah. EJ, how did it leave you feeling financially?
When I looked at it, anytime you look at a quarterback extension, like you said, you always pause and you always think about, what is going to be down the line. Like this year is cool because he's, like you said, he's still playing out on his rookie deal. So it's an extension. So this last year, he's only making $10 million this year, but then you got the next year's coming. He doesn't make like 40 plus millions like 2 or 3 years down the line, if I'm not mistaken. Only 38% of it, I think, is guaranteed. So, like I said, Beane has always been a wizard at, constructing these contracts where it's going to be beneficial for the team and they'll be able to be, profitable down the line for the team, that is. But I mean, what it did get me to thinking, and Travis mentioned it, is when it's time to pay Stephon Diggs, what is it doing? What is it going to do? And then when it's time to pay Tremaine Edmonds, what is this contract going to look like? Is Josh going to be having to maneuver, some of his salary around to make sure these guys, stay, and that the Bills are going to be competitive for the time being going forward, like Brady has done throughout his career, moving some of his salary around to stay competitive. So that's the only, hang up that I see with his contract. How willing is Josh going to be to move his contract around for other players? But I'm totally fine with this deal. Like I said, this year, next year is going to be fine, but their Super Bowl window, that was the question I was asking myself. When this big money kicks in, where does their Super Bowl window lie? Like, how long is it going to be until this big money kicks in? And I was saying to myself, I think they may have 2 or 3 years on this Super Bowl window with this contract to get it done. So that was the only big thought that I had, about this contract.
Yeah, and in your initial point, you kind of alluded to the fact that, Allen came out and said that they're paying me for what I'm going to do, not what I've done. And, the fact that he understands that, that's good. But I think in our shoes, from people who analyze what this team does and analyze what the players do and how well they perform, I believe that, kind of the next couple months or a couple years, next 8, quite frankly, it's a little alleviating to know that, there was so much doubt surrounding this player and there was so much that needed to be done, so much improvement that needed to be made, so much that he needed to prove, and then he did it. There's alleviation in what potential worry could sprout up from the next couple of years and what lies ahead. I don't know about you guys, but I don't really have any kind of doubt in Josh Allen being worth the contract that he was given this past weekend. Do either of you?
Not at all.
So,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're fine.
Oh no, I was just gonna say I have no doubts that he's worth the contract he's got. I mean, it's all about what the market dictates. You know, Dak got paid. We knew he was gonna get $200+ million, and he's right there with Dak. And then he didn't get as much as Mahomes, but he got more guaranteed money than Mahomes, and they pretty much paid him what the market dictated. So I mean, he's earned his money. Like I said, they're paying him based on what he's going to do. And to Travis's point, when that TV money kicks in, who knows what the new contract market for quarterbacks are going to be? It's probably going to be $60 million a year or $70 million a year, some craziness number like that. And Josh deal may become a bargain at that point. So he's definitely earned every bit of his money, and I think he's going to earn his money due to the fact that he got better in areas that can be predicted year to year, and that's pretty stable.
And I think you were kind of talking about how Josh could be open to moving his money around. I think it's an important thing to keep in mind that he was open about having a team-friendly deal to be able to help the Bills be competitive. So I'm not saying that I'm not necessarily worried about him being able to move his money around or wanting to move his money around. I'm not even really a huge advocate of players doing that because I think that creates problems for the franchise, and it could get you into some financial troubles down the line. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But the fact is that Josh is open to being able to take less money so that the team can be able to have the pieces it needs in order to have success. And, really, I'm kind of curious. I haven't really asked either of you this question. I really want to know what you have to say. Travis, what would you say your overall expectations are for Josh Allen this year? What would you go into this year feeling, and you come out of it and you'd say that was a good year? Do you think he needs to improve upon last year, or do you think if he has a season comparable to last year, that'd be good enough for you? Muted. There you go.
Sorry. To me, that's like splitting hairs. There's a few things I think he can get better at. We can all agree. The big thing for me is that Josh Allen has proven that he can improve. He's not a static player. He's been able to identify his weaknesses, and he's not necessarily ashamed of them. He uses it to get better. And then when you have your quarterback coach or your quarterback guru tell everyone that you have no ceiling, I mean, it's only you get those two things together, and I don't necessarily, the numbers don't really mean anything. The individual play to me doesn't really mean anything to me. To answer your question, it's to get to the Super Bowl. He's got to get to the Super Bowl. This team is stacked. I mean, just, we'll talk about it later, but just watching him operate the offense Saturday was, I mean, it's kind of like, when you watch some other guy play, like Aaron Rodgers, and he's just he can't miss, and it looks like he's playing backyard football, men among boys. That's what it looked like, and I can't remember the last time we saw some of it last year, but to really the defense wasn't playing bad at all, but just to see him move the ball the way he did, I really think it's less about the stats and it's more about getting us to that Super Bowl. For me to really say, this is what is expected now.
I tend to agree with you, EJ. How do you feel? What are your expectations for Josh going into the season?
Yeah, I'm right with both you guys. It's definitely Super Bowl or bust. I mean, he showed us that he can be an MVP caliber player. I expect him to regress a tad bit, but I don't expect him to regress so much so where he's still not in the MVP conversation. Like Travis said, this team is stacked. They've got their number one wide receiver. They've got a solid defense. They just drafted 2 pass rushers to try to improve that pass rush. I mean, that's what's gonna have to be his measuring stick at this point. He's already made the AFC Championship, so now that next step is getting and winning the Super Bowl. And I think that the Bills have the roster to get there. I don't think they're the best in the AFC, but I think they have the roster to get there. I think Josh is going to do his part to get them there because he will still be dominant. He's still one of the best players overall in the league. So, I mean, it's Super Bowl or bust for them at this point. There's really nowhere else for Buffalo to go but the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that's really I wouldn't even say it's a hump, because it's not like they've been snagged up on the AFC Championship game for the past couple of years. This is a team that has been growing steam over the past 3 years. Josh Allen's included in that. Josh Allen's been getting better year over year. And I don't necessarily agree that he's going to regress, but I do think that he's going to have a really good year. But however good this season is for Josh is also however good this season went for the Bills. If the Bills go to the playoffs and they get bounced in the first round, this season was a failure. If the Bills go to the playoffs, and believe it or not, I'm going to go as far as to say if they make it to the AFC Championship, that's a failure as well. This year is Super Bowl or bust for this team. I'm not saying that if they don't go to the Super Bowl, that this is the worst season. That's not what I'm saying. But the expectations are pretty cut and dry. This team, where they have come from, how far they have come, and I don't have any doubt in my mind that they're still going to maintain some sort of underdog mentality, because that's just the culture that they have throughout that locker room. That's the culture that all those individuals carry with them every day. And, that's the kind of mentality that Sean McDermott and this coaching staff promotes throughout all of their players. That's not really my concern. But Josh Allen is the heartbeat of this football team. However successful he is this year is also however successful this team will be, in my opinion. There's things that need to click, that need to fall into place. The defense needs to improve from last year. The pass rush needs to improve from last year. But if Josh can play to the level that he played at last season, if the offense can play, I don't expect them to play at the level they were at last year. I honestly expect this offense to be improved from last season. I think that this is a really big year for the team. I think that they could I think they're going to go to the Super Bowl. And that is really how I feel. I'm on par with all these gentlemen. I agree with them with the fact that this year is Super Bowl or bust, and that's what's dependent on as to whether this is a successful year for Josh Allen or not, is however far the Bills go. Because, the stats are the stats. He could have an MVP season and still lose in the first round of the playoffs, and it's an unsuccessful season. That's really
so Clay, I got a quick question for you before you keep going. So for both of you guys, actually, so what does the improvement of the offense look like then? Because I asked Joe Miller the same question. What is the improvement of the offense in both you guys' eyes look like?
Travis, you can take that first.
So with the improvement, obviously we need to be able to run the ball when it's needed. I don't think we need to change our philosophy, and I don't think we will. Judging by what I saw, we're not going to. But in those, what I didn't like was when we were in the red zone, we were kind of in a box. We didn't run the ball well inside the 5. Allen's pulling rabbits out of his hat half the time, hitting Lee Smith, hitting Diggs falling down next to Jalen Ramsey, hitting Croft, belly pop passes to Knox. So I think we need to run the ball better when needed, specifically in the red zone. And I just think the overall consistency of everyone being on the same page. I mean, last year there wasn't much time to practice, so they were gelling on the fly. With a full off season and really kind of getting to know where everyone needs to be, I think we're going to see it. But also that is going to be key to really that's the difference between Kansas City and Buffalo last year. I feel like Mahomes was on the same page as his 2 top targets, where John Brown didn't look like him and Allen were on the same page in that game. So just those fine-tuned things, I think they'll be good, especially with a better defensive performance throughout the year.
I tend to agree with Travis, but kind of to piggyback off of his point, the running game is really contingent of how successful the Bills are up front. And the one place that I saw them struggle with the most, which was really why they struggled in the run game, was being able to establish the line of scrimmage. Because when you can't establish the line of scrimmage and, just force the team out of your way to get where you need to go in short yardage situations, or as Travis was talking about in the red zone, when it gets tighter and you don't really have much field to play with to open guys up in certain areas, the pick routes aren't really, they're not as allowed anymore as they used to be. So that they kind of have their hands behind their back with those. And, the overall offense, the efficiency of the offense would improve with an improved running game. And that is directly contingent upon the interior of that offensive line improving from last year. Players like Cody Ford, players like John Feliciano and Mitch Morse, and maybe even Forrest Lamp if he can compete his way into the starting left guard spot. We'll talk about that in a bit. But if players along the interior of the offensive line and the overall chemistry of that offensive line can improve from last year, I think you'll see the running game come right alongside of that. What the Bills offense needs more than anything is, like Travis was saying, being able to run the ball when they need to run the clock out, when they need to get the extra yard, when they need to get in, when they're in the goal line and they need to get into the end zone for a touchdown. In those sort of situations, that's when the Bills need to be able to run the ball. That we've seen where this offense can go with just, purely, almost not purely, but almost practically running it just solely out of the pass. We've seen what the offense is able to do, but that's Josh Allen. That's Josh Allen being able to play on the fly and being able to improv with the ball in his hands. And, there's a lot of playmaking that goes into that. I just think you would see a more buttoned up, a more controlled approach, a more methodical approach, if you will, if you're able to run the ball better with Zach Moss and with Devin Singletary. And I think that's going to be as a result of improved play along the interior of the offensive line, if it's to come this year.
Yeah, I agree with both you guys 100%. It's going to be contingent on Buffalo being more balanced. And again, I'll say it again because I've said it 100 times. I predicted, that they were going to lose that game to the Chiefs because they were not going to be able to achieve some type of balance. They were going to try to go in there, go point for point with Kansas City, and it's just not the game plan that you wanted to go, especially as Travis mentioned that him and John Brown wasn't on the same page because John Brown was hurt. As we know, Diggs was hurt. Beasley was playing with a broken leg. Gabe Davis was hurt that game too. Like, they had a rash of injuries, and it just wasn't gonna, it wasn't gonna go. And then even Zach Moss got hurt the Colts game, and so, I just think like if they achieve some type of balance. I know everyone is always talking about, well, it's not about balance. It's just about running, when it's needed and being effective when you run. I think they need to have some balance. There's no way. I mean, Buffalo actually won a playoff game by running the ball only once in a half. Like, I've never heard that before in my life. But they're efficient. They're so efficient passing the ball. It's just like F the running. That's exactly how they play. They play analytical ball. Pass it as much as you possibly can. But again, their only big roadblock is the Chiefs. And when your pass rush isn't up to par the way that they wanted it to be, you have to have some type of other strategy to employ. And they did not employ a strategy that could have worked with trying to move the ball on the ground because of the interior line. So if they get better play from their interior line, as both you guys mentioned, if they give more commitment to the run, as Zach Moss alluded to in one of his offseason interviews, and get that rhythm that he spoke of, I think that can be a recipe, or that could be a tool in their toolbox that they can use to overcome the Chiefs or any team for that matter.
And real quick, regarding the Chiefs, in like the 5 or 6 losses that Mahomes has suffered as the quarterback of the Chiefs, every single one of the teams that they beat, 100+ yards. Like, I think they averaged like 28 carries a game. Every team that beats the Chiefs ran it down their throat. Mm-hmm.
There you go.
The Raiders did it. There. Tampa did. It's I agree with you. I love to watch the Bills pass, but when you play the Chiefs and you're hobbled, like you said, that was the difference.
Yeah, that's really it. Just having that in your arsenal is just so important. You think about how much a good running game helps a young quarterback. Imagine what a good running game would have done for this offense last year. Imagine the clip that this offense would have been producing at last year, and how it would have helped, the fact that the defense would be on edge. You're not just sitting there and pinning your ears back and going at the quarterback if you're on the defensive line. You're not just going into your drops in your zone coverage or finding your man-and-man coverage. There's if there were actual concern in regard for the Bills' rushing attack, this offense, you would have seen it reach to a different heights. And, that's really kind of what a lot of people are hoping to see from the offense this year. But, as you guys kind of said, and as a YouTube commenter said, that's his name, is they need to stay healthy. That is the biggest thing for this team this year, is they need to stay healthy. This team is – I'll go as far as to say this team is stacked. They have their pieces in place where they want them. The pieces are there for the Bills to be successful. They have the players and the personnel that they want. And this is the year that they need to go and achieve the pinnacle of their goal, which is the Super Bowl. And, that's a great discussion. I'm glad we all agree that the rushing attack is really what this offense is contingent of improving on. I think the fact that, like EJ alluded to, the fact that they're in practice and they can get the reps that they need at this time of the year. They lost John Brown from last year, but gaining Emmanuel Sanders, really only having one guy in the passing offense that's really got to get acclimated with the routes and the offense and the scheme. And, that being one of the most veteran guy in the room, there's not much acclimation to have for this team. You know, they're going to their 4th season with the same quarterback and the same offensive coordinator. The pieces are in place. This is what the Bills were hoping to have. This is a very ideal situation for this season. It's just a matter of execution at this point. And, you know, like we've been talking about along the interior and how, you know, the Bills offensive line needs to improve. I want to talk about, you know, we're going to transition into into the training camp and the things that we've heard and the things that we've seen and the reports that we're going off of. I want to talk about a couple players that we all feel we need to see something from this preseason in order for the Bills to overall improve in either that area of the field or that side of the ball. And the one player I'm really looking for improvement from this year on the offensive side of the ball in particular is Cody Ford. And, you know, we've seen some stories come out about Cody Ford and his changed approach and how he's coming or approaching this season and how, you know, he acquired a mental coach to kind of help him focus and keep him on track. And, you know, these are many things that I have really needed to hear from about Cody Ford. These are things that, you know, I have had very strong opinions of Cody Ford since he's come onto the team. I haven't been very fond of him. I don't think he's been very good, and I didn't think he was going to be very good going into this year until I heard the certain things that I needed to hear. The fact that his focus has been readjusted, the fact that he's coming in, and, you know, the team flat out called him out a couple times, whether it was in the offseason or prior to training camp, about how, you know, his position is not going to be handed to him this year. And they created a bunch of competition up front in that offensive line room to really kind of force him to earn that spot. EJ, what are your initial thoughts of how Cody Ford is approaching this year and, you know, really coming into a prove-it year? What do you think we really have to expect from the third-year offensive line?
To be honest, we don't know what to expect, to be quite honest with you, because we don't know, number one, what position he's most comfortable at. They moved him from tackle to guard. You know, and then he's talking about, you know, he has a renewed focus, and clearly there was something wrong with him mentally, but seems like he's got that under control. But he is one of the players that needs to step up. So as far as knowing what to expect from him, I expect for him to come in there, compete, and I expect him to be the starting left guard. I think he's right. You know, when players aren't right mentally, and some players talk about this, when they're not right mentally, you can't bang in the trenches. And Clayton mentioned this, you know, off air, like when you are coming out soft and your mind ain't in it, you can't be going up against 300-pound defensive tackles trying to block or trying to pull or do any of that stuff. So the fact that he said that he's mentally right now, the fact that he's in a better place, I'm expecting him to start. I'm expecting him to earn that. I think he was a 2nd or 3rd round pick. I think it was a 2nd round pick that he was, and I'm expecting him to contribute and be a big contributor, you know, on this offensive line. I have gained some type of optimism for Cody Ford as the offseason has progressed. I have been one of his biggest critics due to the fact that he has just not been good, period. But I am willing to sit here and be like, I'm ready to see what he can do. Mentally right, healthy, and engaged, and with the support of his teammates and his coaching staff behind him, I'm ready to see the type of leap he's getting ready to take.
Travis, what are your thoughts on Cody Ford going into the season?
Just like you guys said, I'm very encouraged by all the things he's saying, all the things he does generally. I think he's kind of gotten a raw deal as far as position, and I like that he doesn't make it as an excuse, because I've always been there, regardless of, you know, what you say about his play, not you specifically, but just Bills Mafia in general. I think he has a gripe to, you know, being put. He shouldn't have been put at right tackle, in my opinion. Yeah. He's a mountain of a man. I don't think he moves well in space, and trying to seal off that is just going against what he's good at. I mean, you put this guy in front of a sled, he'll push it here to wherever he was born. You know, I mean, the guy is a monster. He's really a big dude, and I think getting him inside, be it staying healthy, that's my biggest worry about him. I'm glad that he got his mind right. I've watched a ton of his training videos, and to come back excuse me, from those injuries are tough. And you know, especially as a big guy, you're losing muscle mass not doing stuff, so it's tough to come back from multiple injuries. If he can stay healthy, like EJ says, I expect him to be a left guard, without a doubt, and I expect him to thrive. Let's just hope he can stay healthy.
Yeah.
And to Travis's point that he made about switching him from right tackle to guard, one of the knocks coming out for him was his arm length. and how short his arm was. He has sub 33, he has sub 34-inch arms, if I'm not mistaken. And when you play in tackle, your arms, you have to have long arms. There's only one tackle in the league with sub 34-inch arms. So the fact that he doesn't have that arm length was a big reason, and a big reason why he was constantly getting his chest won by defensive ends. So now guard is a better spot for him. But that was just a quick scouting note as to why, the move from right tackle to guard was a better one, just because of that arm length is a big thing when it comes to playing tackle.
I think it's also important to mention about how he was a better guard in college than he was a tackle. That is one thing I remember of Cody Ford coming out of Oklahoma, was the fact that, he had position flexibility. He could play inside, he could play outside. But the biggest thing was, I'm going off of PFF grades. His PFF grade along the interior left guard was slightly better than it was at right tackle. And they were both good grades, but he was still a better guard than he was a right tackle. And, that's interesting. That's interesting. That's something to keep in mind. But really, kind of what EJ was alluding to of what I said off air about Cody Ford. You think about Cody Ford, and he hasn't played football since last October. When was he got hurt? Week 2? Would it have been week 2? I believe it was maybe it was week 3 against the Rams. I think it was week 3 against the Rams. Because it would have been. When you are on the shelf for that long, when you really are just rehabbing, you're not really playing football. You have the things that you're obligated to do and the functionalities that you're supposed to do, be able to maintain your playing shape and what have you. But the matter of fact is you just have a lot more downtime when you're rehabbing like that. The matter of fact is you're just going to be on your cell phone a little more. You're going to be doing the extracurriculars a little more. And what I'm really kind of getting at is, I think the exterior kind of got to him a little bit because, there wasn't a lot of nice things to be said about Cody Ford, and there wasn't a lot of nice things being said about Cody Ford. And, as a football player, confidence is a huge thing on the offensive line. I don't know about you guys, but personally, I want my offensive linemen to be big-headed. I want them to be bigger-headed than they are human. Because you know what? The one thing that I really love seeing in offensive linemen are confident people. Because if you're confident, that means that you can rebound. That means you're resilient. That means that if you get beat, you're going to get right back up to the line of scrimmage and come back at the guy that beat you again. But if you're not confident, if there's any kind of, any kind of thought process going through your head, any kind of doubt in your mind and yourself or whatever it is that you may be doing, the likelihood of you getting beat is pretty high. You put your hand in the stance and, the guy across from you, they're always going to be big. The odds of you losing that matchup, if you have doubt in your head, are pretty high. And, I think that could be just as big of an ailment of Cody Ford as any other technical or any kind of technique that he was or wasn't using during his timing. He didn't get many snaps at left guard last year, so we really don't have much to go off of. But what I will say is if Cody Ford truly is confident, if he's truly going out there and he's having fun, he's playing fast and he's playing physical, and he's not worried about all the other things that he could be worried about, then I think you're going to see a rejuvenated Cody Ford. And I think you're going to see him have his best season as a pro, quite frankly, because, hey, you know what? If he's going out there, he's doing his job. He's not worrying about all the extracurriculars. He's not worrying about the voices. He's not worried about what people have to say. I think you're going to see Cody Ford have a pretty good season this year. And, another player along the trenches that I'm really excited to see this year, that I'm really excited to kind of, have Bills Mafia get off his back a little bit because, people get upset with the lack of production from this position, but it's not all about the numbers and it's always about the tape. And that's Ed Oliver. EJ, this is a player that you had brought up to me and a player that you think has a lot to prove this season, a player that you're excited to see yourself. Why don't you get into that a little bit? What do you think Ed Oliver needs to do this year to prove himself to you?
First and foremost, Ed Oliver needs to improve his play in the run game. He had the 5th worst run defense grade of all interior linemen in the NFL. That has to certainly improve. We at least need him to be average. We need him to be an average run defender. But what I do love and what I would like to say about Ed Oliver is I just put up an article on the coldfrontreport.com about the 4 players that the Bills have that will help them get to the Super Bowl and they need significant contributions from. Ed Oliver is certainly one of those players, just due to the fact that he was picked very highly and he has all the talent to be a difference maker in the run game and in the pass game. That is exactly what he did at Houston. And he had a pass rush grade of 72.3, and he had a true pass rush grade, which is taking out screens and RPOs and things like that when the quarterback's getting out quick on true passing concepts. He had a 79.5 pass rushing grade, which is almost 80, which is almost an elite grade. So my thing is like he has all the skill set and he has all the talent to give Bills Mafia. I'm not saying he's going to be Aaron Donald, but Aaron Donald type like impact. If he gave Bills Mafia like Grady Jarrett type impact, something like that, or even like Sheldon Richardson impact like that in the passing game, being a pass rusher, that will give the Bills Mafia that interior pressure that quarterbacks like Mahomes can't handle or quarterbacks like Lamar don't like. He will single-handedly be able to put together games where he's just wrecking games, and that is exactly what he was drafted to do, to be that disruptive interior force. And one thing I wanted to note just before I get done with my soliloquy is that a lot of people say that Ed Oliver has struggled because he's been playing out of position, and at Houston he was a one tech and they said that was not his position, but last year he played 66% of his snaps at 3 tech and only 6% of his snaps at 1 tech. So he was playing at a perfect position. He just needs to use his hands better, and he just needs to be able to defeat double teams better, at least create piles. But he can't be the 5th worst, run defense interior defensive lineman in the league. He has to be average. And if he takes another step forward in the passing game, I think the Bills will get the much needed pass rush that they need from the interior that can put them over the Super Bowl hump.
Great stuff. Travis, what are your thoughts on Ed Oliver heading into this season?
I think it's one of those, I'm not going to say make or break, but I think as far as an extension, it could be for sure. EJ broke it down very well regarding his statistics, and that's just, there's no defending that. If you're that far down and you're supposed to be somebody who is a playmaker, drafted in the top 10 of the first round, you can't be at the bottom of that list, regardless of our situation. Yes, it's funny because we mentioned Starr. Well, nobody seemed to miss him when he opted out, but now he seems like he's one of the defense's most popular player among fans, when most of them were upset with his contract, was upset with his play. I think a lot of it has to do with Ed growing as well. You can kind of see under the surface. He's got a lot of Cody Ford in him. He's a roughneck dude who likes to hit people, and you want him to be able to rein it all in and not only get after the passer but stop the run. I think we will see an improvement, but again, it's hard to judge by what's coming out of camp. You really haven't heard too much outside of that little fight with Spencer Brown. Whether that's good or good or bad, we won't know. But I'm expecting to at least find out where we stand with Ed Oliver by the end of this season.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing about this year for Ed Oliver is that the expectations aren't that it's going to be similar to his rookie year or his second year. This is I'm not saying. Well, no, I am saying this is a year where Ed Oliver needs to prove himself, where to the point where we're confident in giving Ed Oliver a second contract. This is really the year where he would earn that type of deal. Where Ed Oliver, you look at what he's done thus far. Statistically, there's not much to speak of. Statistically, he shows up here and there, and he's made plays, and on tape I've seen a lot that he can hold his ground, that he's capable, he's explosive, he's violent with his hands. Like EJ was saying, he needs to get better with his hands. He needs to learn how to place his hands better and use his strength to his advantage. But that's something that kind of comes over time. But this is the time where you're supposed to see that kind of come to fruition. You're supposed to see the culmination of the technique that he's been taught. You come from a school like Houston, where I do remember this. They hired his defensive line coach from high school to coach at Houston. Then you come into the NFL and you're getting professional coaching. These things need to start coming to a culmination for Ed Oliver. You need to start seeing productivity. And the first thing I said to EJ when we first had this conversation off air was, how contingent is Ed Oliver's success to everybody else? And the one response he had for me was, it doesn't need to be contingent of anything anymore, which I tend to agree with. Ed Oliver, I'm not saying he's going to be Aaron Donald. I'm not going to go to that extent. Does his play style remind you of Aaron Donald? He's violent and he's smaller and he can maintain leverage comparably to Aaron Donald. Absolutely. But right now, this season, this is a year where I think everybody is a little more comfortable with the fact that Star Lotulelei is back in place, and they do have a bona fide one technique to play that position and take up blockers, and potentially free up Ed Oliver. And the fact remains that, there's no excuses for Ed Oliver at that point.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing about the double team where he should go inside or he's playing zero technique or nose tackle. He shouldn't be facing those situations anymore, and he should be able to, just let the reins off and go find the ball and get the ball and be able to attack the way he was drafted here to do. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what I can see. I see where EJ is coming from. This is a season for Ed Oliver that he has. I wouldn't say he has as much to prove as Cody Ford, but this season is certainly as substantial for him in terms of his long-term outlook for the Bills, his long-term outlook in the NFL. This season's going to determine a lot for Ed Oliver in the future. But yeah, I'm expecting a lot from Ed Oliver this year. That the improvement of the defense, the improvement of the overall pass rush, in my opinion, is contingent of Ed Oliver having a successful year and honestly having a breakout season. That's really kind of where my expectations lie for him. I'm not saying because my confidence dwindles that I don't have confidence in Ed Oliver. I expect him to have a good season, a much better season than his previous two. Now that he's able to go out there and play three technique for a majority of the time and be able to go out there and do his thing, hopefully. But another player we all kind of I don't know about you, EJ, but I know I'm a little nervous about it because I was talking about Andre Roberts before we got on air, and this is a player that Travis had mentioned to me prior to the show, Isaiah Mckenzie, who is going to probably take the kick return duties this year. And I'm not sure how Bills Mafia feels about that, but I know how I feel. Travis, how do you feel about Isaiah Mckenzie going into the season? What do you think he needs to prove? And do you think he's going to really kind of quiet any doubters that are out there?
So the thing about Isaiah Mckenzie, I really believe that majority of it is mental. You kind of heard people, they had articles about it, about him trusting himself. And it really is that. I mean, it's a little guy in a big man's game. And sometimes he played like that. The one thing I will say is I think his previous attempts at being punt returner, I think it's a little overblown. Was he great? By all means, no. In college, he wasn't the best. With the Bills, but I do think, in Denver and with the Bills, he looked a little shaky, but I do think it's a little overblown. But what I can say is Saturday, I was basically, 5 rows back from where all the returners were shagging punts and kickoffs. And it was noticeably different when he fielded punts versus Stevenson and Powell. Those two didn't pay themselves any favors because they were shaky at best, but Mckenzie was very fluid in fielding. He didn't bobble any. He caught it right in the breadbasket. It was very Andre Robert-esque where that ball just hits him right in between the forearm and the chest and it sticks there. It was a relief for me to see. And not only was he the first guy out there on the field shagging punts, with the punter, with the special teams unit, he was the first one out there. But when he came into when they were doing special teams practice, he was always the first guy out there. Not only that, but with Cole Beasley being on the sideline Saturday, he was the first guy in at slot, and he did make plays. So number one, I would be completely and utterly shocked if he was not the returner. And also, which goes without saying, this guy's going to make a team and he's going to have an impact on the offense. You can see he's playing with confidence. He's got the charisma. And I really think Buffalo's the type of place that kind of lets him be him. And it goes to show, especially with his confidence.
Absolutely. And, I know how I feel about Mckenzie as a kick returner, but EJ, what do you think about Isaiah Mckenzie going into 2021? He's going to have more. He's been kind of the gadget guy for this offense for the last couple of years, ever since 2018 when they brought him in, when he was really getting a run at wide receiver. Ever since then, he's really kind of just been the gadget guy, not really relied upon every game to field punts and kicks. How do you feel about him being the returner? Do you think he has a lot to prove, or are you comfortable with Isaiah Mckenzie this year being the kick returner?
Well, I have no choice but to be comfortable with Isaiah Mckenzie. I mean, he's going up against a rookie and, if I'm not mistaken, an undrafted guy. So, yes, Isaiah McKenzie's our best option at this point. Am I comfortable with him? Comfortable is a very tough word. I wouldn't go as far as comfortable, but he, like Travis said, he saw him up close and personal, and he looked comfortable fielding the kicks. But he has a bunch to prove. He probably has the most to prove. The Bills Mafia has been hyping Isaiah McKenzie up since the Miami game where he scored 3 touchdowns. So this is Isaiah McKenzie's time to show that he's worth the new contract that he got, that he's worth carving out a nice niche for himself on this team. He did score a touchdown on a jet sweep, if I'm not mistaken, in one of the scrimmage games. So this is his time to show his worth. This is the time to show that they should keep him around. So I'm very anxious to see what he does. I am not the biggest Isaiah McKenzie fan, but I'm willing to see what he does, and I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. And again, against Miami, that last game, he did snap, had 3 touchdowns. So now let's see if he can be as consistent as Andre Roberts was.
Okay. Before I really get into this, I want to say I like Isaiah McKenzie. You go back to 2018 when the Bills wide receiver room consisted of Ray McCloud, Robert Foster, Zay Jones, Andre Holmes, and Isaiah McKenzie. Isaiah McKenzie was one of the most was one of my favorite players out of that crew. I thought he came from Denver. He really showed a lot of potential in what he could do in an offense and what he could do with his electricity, with his agility, and all of the things that he brings to the field as a football player. And the fact that he's been able to stick on this team since then when the other players that I mentioned haven't, the tip of the cap to Isaiah McKenzie. There's a lot to be respected in that. The fact that he's carved himself out a role on this football team and been able to stick on this roster and keep himself paid, that's awesome. That's good for him. But as a kick returner, I mean, you go back to college. That's how it's great that he's fielding these punts in practice comfortably. I'm glad he is. I hope he can do the same thing when there's 80,000 people in that stadium and it is loud and you're playing the Jets or you're playing the Steelers, you're playing whoever, and he can field those punts and kicks just as comfortably. Because these are issues that have plagued Isaiah McKenzie going back to college. You have these guys that come out of school that are, they have kick return abilities. Whereas you have also guys who are kick return specialists, guys who, that is what they did. And that is what Isaiah McKenzie did. And if he has alleviated his ball security issues going all the way back to the beginning of his career, then I would be muted. I would be happy if he went this year without muffing more than 3 kicks. But the fact remains that I have not seen him do that on film throughout the duration of an entire season. The fact remains that Andre Roberts was a really good kick returner for this football team for the past 2 years, and he was worth every penny of what Houston gave him, and I was upset that the Bills did not give him $1 million more to stay in Buffalo because that's what he was worth, but that's not what he was worth to the Bills. Isaiah McKenzie, he has a role on the offense, whereas Andre Roberts really didn't. He was just a kick returner, whereas, like Travis mentioned, Isaiah McKenzie is the first slot receiver in there once Cole Beasley's out of there. So Isaiah McKenzie has solidified himself a spot on this roster. That's for sure. That's not what I'm questioning. However, what I am questioning is how consistent he can field these kicks and how good he can field these kicks and how good of a kick returner he'll really be. I know he scored that touchdown at the end of the season last year, but there wasn't really much pressure in that play. There wasn't much pressure in that situation. I'm just curious. I'm optimistic, but I'm curious for Isaiah McKenzie. I hope it works out for him. This is a player where if he has a good year this year, he's about to get paid next year. He's on a contract year. He's taking on more of a role this year than he's had in the past 3. So this is really a chance for Isaiah McKenzie to prove himself as well. If he can go this year without, really having those ball security issues that we've seen in the past, then hey, I'll be shut up, and Isaiah McKenzie and the Bills special team unit will hopefully have another successful year like they've had in these past 2. But no,
well, you better hope that he does, because the other 2 guys, I'm telling you, you're not going to be comfortable with them.
They didn't leave themselves much room for error. If Isaiah McKenzie's not the guy, then who is? No. I think a lot of people are quick to forget that.
Micah Hyde. I'm telling you, that's what's happening.
Right, that's what I was about to say. A lot of people are quick to forget that the Bills' kick return and punt return situation in 2018 was pretty much diluted down to the fact that Isaiah McKenzie, he wasn't consistent. He couldn't field the kick. So they just sent out their starting safety, a Pro Bowl, All-Pro safety out there to just wave his hand in the air and catch the kick because he could field it. I really don't want the Bills' return unit to be dwindled down to that because, over the past couple of years, you've seen Andre Roberts' ability to flip the field for this offense and how much, that really kind of changes a game. That's a game-changing play. It shoots a a shot of electricity into all of the offensive players as they come onto the field. They only have, whatever difference it is, 55 yards to go instead of 80, or 45 yards to go instead of 75, whatever it may be. That is a huge momentum shift when a special teams unit is able to shift the field. And I'm just hoping that the Bills special teams unit is able to do things comparable to that of what they did these past 2 seasons. But there's a couple under the radar players that, I've had my eyes on. One specifically that, we were talking about the running game earlier, that being Matt Breida. That is a player that I'm really curious to see what he really kind of can do, if he can even land himself a roster spot. Because, they have 4 bodies back there. They have Antonio Williams. They have Zach Moss and Devin Singletary, who I think you can assume are roster locks. I'm going to put an asterisk not next to Zach Moss, but maybe Devin Singletary. You never really know, but you assume that those 2 are roster locks. Antonio Williams and Matt Breida, that's really where the competition is in the running back room. I mean, you had Tywan Jones, but he's a special teams guy. I'm excited to see what really Matt Breida can provide in his role in the preseason, because I think he's going to get a fair shake. I think him and Antonio Williams are going to take a bulk of the carries in the later halves of these games. It's going to be interesting to see how they work Christian Wade in there as well. I don't think Christian Wade's going to make the team, and I think Matt Breida has a better shot at making this team. But Matt Breida has something that no one else in that Bills backfield has, and that is some natural speed. And that is something that this Bills backfield, in my opinion, has really been hurting over these last couple of years. And that's really, I wouldn't say is the sole reason, but that's one of the reasons why you really haven't seen much productivity over these last, over the last season and a half, really, out of the Bills rushing attack. I really hope that Matt Breida can carve himself out a role on this team, earn himself a roster spot, so that the Bills can possess that speed on offense in their backfield. I mean, they have it with Isaiah McKenzie, but to have a natural back like Matt Breida that you can put out there, and the defense has to account for Matt Breida, in my opinion. Does he have fumbling issues? Absolutely. But similar to Isaiah McKenzie, if he can fix his ball security issues going into this year, and he can earn himself a spot on this team, I think he could be a weapon in the Bills' arsenal for this offense. And, I'm excited to see what he can provide. EJ, what are your thoughts on Matt Breida and his potential and his ability to maybe stick on this roster and earn himself a role in this offense?
Here's my thing with that. It's while I do like Matt Breida, I do like the speed element that he brings to this team, as we alluded to at the beginning of the show. It's just how many opportunities is he actually going to get with Devin Singletary and Zach Moss both in front of him? Are you telling me that he's going to be strictly a third down back? Are you telling me that he's going to get maybe 3 carries a game when they only run they ran the second least amount in the league? So it doesn't really leave that many carries and leave that much space for Matt Breida to maneuver and do what he has to do. Are you telling me that he's going to be consistently ripping off big runs? Because no running back in the league does that, as regardless of how good Derrick Henry is, no running back rips off runs like that. So it's tough for me to see where Breida is going to actually get his opportunity to show where he's going to make an impact. Excuse me. But I mean, if he makes his roster, I'm going to be very interested to see how he's utilized by Dable, especially with Dable's unwillingness to run the ball consistently, and especially with 2 other running backs in front of him. So, I mean, I like Matt Breida. I hope that he does make the team, because they do need some type of speed element back there. But just where is his opportunity schematically going to come from?
Right, Travis. What are your thoughts on Matt Breida and what he could possibly bring to the Bills this year if he'll make the team?
Well, EJ nailed it. I mean, we're talking about the third string running back in an offense that runs the ball a handful of times each game. And, the only reason why I think we're having this conversation is because of that speed. Saturday, he was beating the defense to the edge consistently, which was nice to see. He had a couple screen passes, which, again, you'd expect. I'm assuming you could kind of plug him into the Isaiah McKenzie gadget role and sweeps and whatnot. But that being said, when we're talking about, the battle at wide receiver, maybe keeping an extra young offensive lineman, I think we're better off served going in that direction, especially when I know, Tywan Jones is not necessarily a running back, but in a numbers game, that's where he kind of falls under on the roster breakdown. So as much as I like the speed element, I don't think there's going to be enough touches for him to kind of warrant a roster spot taken away from somebody else. And that being said, Antonio Williams looked good Saturday. if I had to pick one running back between him and Breida, I'm picking Antonio because, and I was never one of, I'm not a Duke Williams lover, and certainly he's kind of taken that role. But objectively, that man runs with a purpose. He's quick. He hits the hole, and he's got some speed from a big guy.
Yeah, my praise for Breida is not a slight at Antonio Williams. I really like Antonio Williams and the kind of the head of steam he has when he has the ball in his hand and the purpose that he runs with. But, EJ, we've kind of discussed two different players that you had analyzed in an article you just posted on coldfrontreport.com. Everybody should go check that out. EJ did a great job on that. But another player that you kind of highlighted that you mentioned to me that you wanted to talk about was Rashad Wildgoose. Rashad Wildgoose and what he could potentially bring to the Bills' defensive backfield, potentially sliding in the slot or outside. What do you anticipate from Rashad Wildgoose and what he may be able to prove in the 2 games of this preseason?
I want him to prove that he can just cover and play the zone scheme the way it needs to be played. And what I mean by that is just not consistently giving up first downs. I mentioned in that same article that Clayton alluded to is that the Bills run the most nickel in the league. So 90% of the time they're in nickel. And therefore, because of that, they need to get average play from that position. And Teron Johnson is not an average slot cornerback. He's probably a below average slot cornerback. And the fact that Rashad Wildgoose is a rookie, he has a wide range of outcomes that I am willing to explore, or I would be willing to explore as a coach. So therefore, like Mookie just said right there, Wildgoose as a nickel, that's what the Bills need. That's what they need. And I put him in this article strictly because Teron Johnson needs some competition at that spot. I can't name the slot cornerback that was behind him last year, and that was solid. They had Cam Lewis a couple games, but who else besides Teron Johnson is an adequate slot corner? They don't have that. So at Wildgoose, I'm expecting something from him at Wisconsin. He was in his zone heavy scheme, so he has some experience, playing in a zone heavy system. So therefore, I could see that if Teron Johnson starts 2021 the way he started 2020, I can see Rashad Wildgoose being a key contributor very quickly to try to mitigate some of that, because they have to get average play out of that position with the amount of nickel that they run.
Yeah, and Wildgoose is a candidate. One moment. Wildgoose is a candidate that I've kind of been enamored by since the Bills drafted him. What he showed on tape during his time at Wisconsin. You're going from 2018 tape or 2019 tape, excuse me. He's an aggressive football player. He's a player that plays that has a nose for the football. And he also showed some potential with his instincts and what he's capable of doing when he drops back into the zone. And that's kind of the mold of a defensive back that really kind of fits what Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier look for in their defensive backs. Guys who play aggressive, guys who aren't afraid to stick their nose in the pile in the run game, and also guys who are smart and instinctive and know how to maintain their zone and be responsible for the area of the field that they've been assigned. Travis, what are your thoughts on Rashad Wildgoose and what he potentially bring? Do you think he's going to press Teron Johnson for that nickel corner job? Do you think he may be able to take his spot, or do you think that this may be that the Bills, they could potentially have a diamond in the rough here for their defense?
Yeah, I don't think he's going to push Teron Johnson this year. I think Teron Neal is going to be either the 1B or just big nickel or even the backup. I see him taking a Dane Jackson type approach this season where he ends up on the practice squad. You have a couple injuries, you end up sending him up. But I think his biggest thing out, EJ nailed it with the cornerback position. He's got to don't let guys catch the ball so quickly and give up those, with a lot of padding. But I think his biggest shot at making this team and sticking here is going to be on special teams. I think he has to prove that he can play special teams while he develops, while he learns the position, while he sharpens his tools, because, I think your nickel is going to be your nickel this year. I don't think he has a chance to unseat Johnson, and with Teron Neal being the big nickel and a lot of defensive players kind of singing his praise as far as getting it, I don't think we really will see too much from Wild Goose this year.
All right, it's been fun with you guys. It's always fun going live with Travis and EJ. These guys are knowledgeable. They're full of insight, full of analytical breakdowns, and you guys are a good crew. I love going live with you guys. I love having these conversations and these discussions with you guys. We don't always agree, but that's the fun of this. That's why it's a discussion and not an argument, right, EJ? We don't argue on here.
Yes, sir.
Well, I appreciate you guys. I appreciate everybody for watching. Travis, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you and what you have coming up in the future?
You can find me on Twitter. My handle's right below me, Trav Blakesley. And starting Friday, I will have my own show here on Cold Front. I know EJ's down for sure. We might have another guest. Friday Night Forecast, where we kind of take our bets on what we're expecting for the upcoming game. This week it'll be regarding the game in Detroit. So look forward to seeing all you guys there.
Yeah, that's good stuff. EJ, why don't you tell the people where they can find you, what you have coming up? You're a busy man. Hey, you argue a lot on Twitter, so I want the people to know where they can find you to stay entertained, because I'm plugged in, and it is a fun show to watch, my friend.
Well, Bills Mafia was on my neck this week. At eDaniel77, you can always find me there. You'll always find my hot takes, and as Travis mentioned, he's having a show, and I'm trying to get my show off the ground too, where I take some of those same hot takes that I have on Twitter, I bring them to a show format such as you, where I'll be able to interact with everyone, and you guys can interact with me on here in Cold Front, and like you guys can interact with me on Twitter. And just so much interaction, because I love interacting with the fans. I love your guys' aggressiveness. I'm here for all of it. So at eDaniel77, come at me with your hot takes. I'm here for it.
Bills Mafia is a passionate bunch, as is EJ Daniels. And EJ, I just want to say, no yelling in the microphone. It doesn't matter how loud you yell into the mic. They will hear you just the same as if you talk with a quiet tone. Inside voices on the mics.
I got you.
If you want to find these guys and make it easy for you, I left the links for them in the description below. You can click on them and go follow them. Be sure to follow the Cold Front Report on Instagram, Twitter, and like us on Facebook. That's at Cold Front Report _Bills News on Instagram. That's at Cold Front Report on Twitter, and Cold Front Report Buffalo Bills News on Facebook. If you want to find me, you can find my Twitter handle in the link below, at CFR Clayton. Not always active on there, but if you want to engage with me, if you want to talk with me, I'm always down to talk to Bills Mafia. I want to thank everybody for watching. I want to thank these guys for their time and joining me tonight. Thank you all. Thanks again for watching. I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Stay safe, stay healthy, and go Bills.